Yes, everybody, we are back late, very late getting started here, but hopefully you'll forgive us. Yes, Alicia and I do have a daily practice of representing individuals and providing strategic immigration advice to individuals and companies. And apparently this morning, I have my other side hustle, which is my home life and dealing with irrigation and lawns and fertilizer, and it was a disaster this morning. So welcome to the podcast. Oh, wait a minute. This isn't a podcast. This is the Immigration Live Q&A on YouTube. If you have not checked out the podcast, which we are going to start pumping out episodes like a crazy frenzy, do it. Head over to Holthe Immigration Law, holthelaw.com, and you'll find the podcast episodes there. If you haven't listened to them, go check it out. Now, there's probably a bunch of people wondering, why are they not live? What is going on? Is there a video today? Yes, we were away last week. And why were we away last week, Alicia?
We were all in Ottawa. So there was the Canadian Bar Association National Immigration Conference for 2023, and I was co-chairing that. And there has not been a conference for the last, since I guess 4 years ago, because we have had COVID. And so with the restrictions and with all the ups and downs in travel, it was a long time coming. And we finally were able to get back together in person. And this is not just immigration lawyers across Canada, it's also government officials, it's senior federal court, it's Department of Justice, it's Canadian Canadian Border Services Agency, CBSA, IRCC officials, members of the tribunals, so the Immigration Refugee Board. Like, we had a whole bunch of fantastic speakers, and it was a great opportunity to come together and talk in person, face to face, discuss what's going on for our clients.
Yeah. And you guys have no clue how much work Alicia put into basically getting this conference up and running. It was an unbelievable amount of work. And so super grateful to have her as a part of my team, because that conference would not have been what it was without her. All right, we got questions. All right, Olsen's saying, hey, did we have a draw yesterday? No, we did not, but we did today, my friend. So I was going through this. These draws are just all over the map. Half of the time, I can't tell if it's a new one or if it's an old one. And this morning, I was looking and I thought, oh, it must have come out yesterday, because yesterday is Wednesday, right? And Wednesdays are when they do draws. No, that's not the case. Apparently, they do them on Thursday as well. So that's what we have here. And you'll see now that things are changing slowly, you guys. They're introducing category-based rounds of invitations. Yes. Thank you so much, Minister. We really appreciate you jumping on and basically stating, once again, what you guys have stated repeatedly before. It's freaking driving me crazy. So the minister said, hey, we're going to start doing these targeted draws here. And that's all fine and dandy. And they had the big, the big release or big announcement about the industries that are going to be picked. Well, fine. But 7 months ago, when I did my episode on the top 6 takeaways with the TR to PR transition, he already listed all the industries. The only thing that was listed, at least this time, the only thing that they did was to narrow the actual industries down to a few for what they're going to do for 2023. Well, that's fine, but these videos takes a lot of time, Minister, and I'm just on a warpath right now because I try to do these, but actually release something that's groundbreaking. Okay. All right. I'll stop whining and complaining here. It's one of these days, Alicia.
So I'll just jump in and add to that yes, they did announce all the categories. So take a look I wrote a blog article on our Holthe Immigration Law website that's going to give you specific details, and it's going to expand everything so that it's all in one spot. So when you're looking, just hover, Mark, hover over the blog.
All good. We're having a good day, guys. Look at this. Oh, hover. Look at that. Igor! I can't reach our blog. Maybe you guys are having the same experience, you guys.
So the category-based draws, it's important to note that you've got to prove that you have at least 6 months of that skilled work experience. And it can't be stuff that you have all of a sudden magically created as a knock, right? You've got to make sure it should be the most recent one, Mark, right at the very top. There you go. All you need to know about express entry category-based draws. So this is important that I've been starting to notice clients reach out and say, hey, I was doing this kind of tech development, and maybe you could recategorize my knock as one of these ones that are now on the category-based
Yeah,
draws,
yeah,
right? So be very, very careful, because the risk here is that it's not just any healthcare occupation. It's not just any STEM occupation. If you keep scrolling down on the article, we've actually listed the table of all of the ones that have been identified that are going to be eligible. But that's it. They're only the ones that are on this list. And so if you look down maybe at the tech, at the STEM occupations, yeah. So there's only some of these that are going to be available, right? So if you're in the information systems 212, yeah, software engineers 21231, and you say, oh, well, but I've been doing stuff that's in a close knock to that. I'm just going to recategorize my job and get an updated letter from my employer, even though I've
yeah.
already had an old express entry profile under a different knock category. That's setting yourself up for trouble. So be really careful about that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Alicia, because that is exactly what's going to happen. People are going to start trying to wedge themselves into knock codes that they just don't qualify for. So
Mhm.
please, please, whatever you do, don't fall into that trap, because once you've tried to pigeonhole yourself into something that you're not, then it just sets the stage for all future applications. And it's possible that that immigration may the officers, because they have so little time to process an application, they would overlook it and just approve, and people then go posting all over internet land that, hey, I got through and all I had to do was just modify my duties a little bit. That's code for misrepresentation and lying. And
Mhm.
I got through, didn't have any problems. There's going to be a lot of that going on. So guess what immigration is going to be looking for? They're going to be looking for people who are doing that. So
Mhm.
don't do that.
Yeah.
Be patient. Do the things that you need to.
And when we talk about this, it's not just if you created an express entry profile under a different knock. It's if you have filed a study permit application and you claimed a different job title, and if you have filed an extension on your study permit or a postgrad work permit or a work permit in between because your passport expired. Be really, really careful to cross-reference all your applications. And if you have changed your job title or duties, or if you have letters from employers in the past, everything's got to check out. It all has to line up.
Yes. Always, always. And those are the kind of things we ensure take place when we're working with our clients and that we teach in the course. So a bunch of people, Alicia, are talking. Can you speak on the category draw, please? Well, we're doing that right now. And we know that eventually the minister will, he will do a round of invitations that address the actual, let me just flip over here, that are actually targeted. But at this stage, if we go down here, I didn't get to the very bottom and I never even talked to you about the draw that happened today. But you can see now they've made some changes to the way the round of invitation page is laid out. So they talk about now how they will rank. Okay. So they could choose a type of round that they'll hold, decide the number of candidates, identify the highest rank, and from the chosen round type, and then invite the candidates. And then you can see here are the types of rounds that the minister will be doing. A general round of invitations. We invite top ranked candidates in the pool who are eligible for one of the 3 express entry programs. So that, you guys, is what we had today. So this morning, if you go through, you'll see June 8th, which is today. They invited 4,800 people, which is kind of that's on the higher end, which took the CRS score to 486. And the only factor that they're looking at here is a person's human capital, their CRS points. But as you scroll back up here, you'll see that they could also do a program specific round. And in this, they invite the top ranking candidates. So once again, CRS is still important, who are eligible for the program. So if we're holding a round specifically for PNPs, we would only invite candidates who are eligible for PNPs. So if we go back historically, that could be, like we've seen, CEC only draws or PNP only draws, or we've had federal skilled trade draws in the past. And then the final one that we have here is the actual category-based rounds of invitations. And pay close attention to this, because it says here, the minister is able to establish a category to meet a specific economic goal. That's what's driving this. Except I would argue that maybe the top thing in your blog post. Oh, let me find your blog here, Alicia. The top one on the list is French language proficiency. As far as I'm concerned, that's not really an economic factor. That is a factor that the government has deemed as important in promoting, the French language across the country, because express entry is outside of Quebec. So I would definitely wouldn't count this number one as being an economic factor. It's not. There's other factors at play, but they then invite the top ranking candidates in the pool who are eligible for this category. Once again, you can see top ranking. So it's possible that the individuals that they select, there are more, that everybody who fits into that category is extended an invitation to apply. That's possible, but there may be more people who are actually eligible for the category, but they only take off the top ranking candidates, so that it may not guarantee that you receive an ITA. And you can see here, category-based rounds add to general and program-specific rounds. So they could say these are CEC candidates who have healthcare experience in the NOC codes that the minister's already identified for us. And then by inviting top ranking candidates, once again, who can help us meet our specific economic goals. And so this is basically kind of how they structure it. And the instructions, they're going to lay out what the specific parameters are for this. So we'll just see what the minister ultimately decides to do.
And take a read of my blog, because I think it's important to realize that even on the category-based draws, candidates still need to meet the minimum selection grid factors, right? You still need to meet those 67 points. And if you look at my blog, I've put links in there to how do you figure out the selection grid, what's kind of express entry 101 in terms of how does express entry work. I've put all links into that so that people can go and read through it and understand that you still need to be meeting those 67 selection grid points. And then it's up to, maybe you have a lower CRS, but you're going to fit that category.
Yes. And I also want to address and just add to that, because I had some questions yesterday. I had a person who said, well, the instructions that IRCC released said that in some cases, if you have 6 months of work experience in these targeted areas that Alicia's laid out here, that then you could get into that particular targeted group. But remember, you still, as Alicia's indicated, have to meet the minimum entry criteria for the CEC, the FSW, and I'll slide over here to the page again. You still have to be eligible for the CEC, FSW, or FST. Even if you're a PNP candidate, you still need to meet these eligibility factors. So there's those 3 levels that come into play. And when you're going through it, the minister has the power now to do the category based, but you still have to meet the minimum entry criteria for the programs to get into the pool, which is a minimum of 1 year, really, depending on the program.
Yeah.
So.
And it's all laid out. If you click that link on there on how express entry works, it takes you back to the government page. On my article on the blog.
There we go.
And if you go how express entry works, there should be a hyperlink, and this kind of is a nice visual for what are the minimum requirements for each of these 3.
Yeah, exactly. And let's see here. It looks like Alicia's just frozen, but she'll join us here in a second. But you can see here, this is a great resource to understand the basics of it. But I also want to point out, once again, that if you are looking for complete instruction that's easy to search, go to the Express Entry course right here. The masterclass will be at the end of the month, but now is actually the time to subscribe so that you're not in a situation where you subscribed the day before and haven't had a chance to go through all of the 10 hours of content before you join me on the actual 4 days, 1 hour each evening of master classes. So we will, I think Alicia, we just lost her feed there. Let's see if I can jump back on. So I'll just chat until she comes back here. I'm going to shrink this out there. So yeah, so we'll wait for Alicia to connect back in. It looks like her feed just kind of froze. Okay, let's see what else. Let's see who we've got tuning in. We've been doing some shout outs, which is great. If you have questions that you want us to answer, please do post them and we will do our best to get to them. Looks like Alicia's back up here. We lost her for a second, but she's rejoined. There we go. Now we're back, Alicia. How are you doing?
Good. Sorry, I don't know what happened, but I
No
connected to
problem.
the internet.
as long as it wasn't a meteor or something that took out the internet tower close to you or something. So that's good. Okay, so what we'll do is I was just explaining that the course is also there to help guide people through the process so that they can understand right from the beginning all the way through. Okay, let's see. We've got a bunch of questions that are coming in fast and furious. We talked about the category based draws. We'll see what happens. Obviously, today's Thursday, and so maybe it will be another couple weeks. I know that the minister has indicated conflicting things, haven't you, Minister? So he'd originally said it was June that this category based would be launched. Well, what's the last day of he said it would be the spring of 2023. So
We're
that's
still
the
technically the
23rd
spring
of
until the
June or something.
21st.
We're still technically in it, so there's room. But then in one of the Ukraine announcements, someone asked a question. He'd indicated that they would be doing it later in the year. So I think he said it in the second half of the year almost. So we'll see what happens. I don't put too much stock in it anymore, other than I amuse myself by watching all the YouTube channels that pop up with all these crazy announcements that the minister has made. So yes. All right. So let's let's just touch on one last thing, Alicia, before we've done videos on this, you guys. One more thing that before we get into answering the questions, and that's the expansion of these 13 more countries that are now qualified for visa-free travel to Canada. And for those of you guys who are wondering what this is about, well, essentially, some countries you can come. You do not need to apply for a TRV to get on a plane and fly. Other countries you do. And what they're doing now is expanding that regime in part with conditions to these additional 13 countries. And one of the big ones was the Philippines. And at this stage, unless there's some program delivery instructions to the contrary, we do not believe that it's an open door for these individuals to apply for work permits right at the port of entry. For example, if you come from Australia, you can actually apply for your work permit at the port of entry when you fly in. Because I think if they were to proceed forward and allow for that with all these new countries, especially the Philippines, we would have one government organization that would be blowing their minds, that would just be out of their mind. And that's the Canada Border Service Agency. And so this really is going to mirror what's happened with Brazil and some of those other countries. And the restrictions are pretty simple. You have to have either held a Canadian visa in the last 10 years. So if you have, you can then apply for an ETA instead of a visa the next time you travel. Or if your TRV is still valid, just keep using it. That's not a problem. Or people who currently hold a U.S. non-immigrant visa can also apply for an ETA instead of the visa when they're traveling. So generally, this is for visitors. And Alicia, why is this beneficial to everybody listening to this little spiel right now? Why is this change for just these 13 countries? Why does it potentially have the ability to benefit everybody? What are your thoughts?
Because it's going to hopefully speed up the entire system, right? When you have fewer people who have to make consular or online GC key applications for a visitor visa, or I guess now there's the visitor visa portal as well. So it's going to reduce some of the case flow through that. I guess maybe the Americans won't be happy with us because there might be more people rushing out to get a US
US
10-year
visa?
visa.
Maybe it's better, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's hopefully going to streamline the entire system if you're reducing the requirement for some of those people to put in visitor visa full applications. So if you meet the new criteria of having either held a Canadian valid visitor visa in the last 10 years, or you currently have a US 10-year visa, then you could apply for an electronic travel authorization. And now I will also add another misrep wrinkle is just be really careful if you're doing that electronic travel authorization application. $7, it's pretty fast, it seems like it's simple, but there's that question on there that says, have you ever been charged, arrested, or detained? And so be really careful if you do have any sort of criminality in your past, because that has to be declared right at the outset on that ETA application. And I know a lot of people think it's pretty innocuous. It's not a big deal what they put in there, and that's not the case. It's really important that you're honest on that ETA application, just like anything that you submit to immigration.
Yeah, exactly. And just flipping back here, one of the things that obviously the government hopes, and we all hope, is that it will have a positive effect on processing times. But this one, it just bothers me. I don't know. It's just like, it's disgraceful, really. Someone from Nigeria wants to come visit in Canada. You're telling me that it takes 737 days. Well, we already know what IRCC thinks of anything in Nigeria. Obviously, they could care less about the people that are there, but Alicia, you've had a little bit of a negative run with IRCC and adoptions from Nigeria, right?
Well, I mean, I've not had a negative run. All those adoptions have been processed and approved, and the kids are here. But it was a struggle throughout, right? And the families actually had hired me to help them to make sure that their Part 2 application was absolutely 100% completely accurate so that there would be no other room for delays on IRCC's part on the back end processing.
Yes. Okay, let's see here. Gotta just pull up one. We've got a super that came in here. Okay, so this also relates, and it's probably good to talk about this because it's kind of the thing that people are most interested in right now is these visas and the effect of this visa-free travel, which, oh boy, it's a good headline, but in practice. Okay, is holding a USA or Canadian tourist visa a benefit in any manner for ongoing PR, PNP process? Is there anything like really, does it make a difference, Alicia?
Well, so a couple of things to be aware of. If you've made a prior application for a visitor visa to Canada or the US or any other country, if it was ever denied or refused, or you were turned away from entering that country, that's something that has to be declared in your express entry application. So be careful about that. When you look at the statutory declarations, it's something that you need to be very careful. Go through your entire history with a fine-tooth comb. If you traveled when you were in school, in high school, and you were over the age of 18 and you forgot about the fact that at one point, oh yeah, I didn't get to go on that trip, immigration's going to come back later, and the federal court has said, yeah, failing to disclose a visa refusal is a ground of misrepresentation. It's going to bar you for 5 years. So be careful about that. If you are doing a permanent residence application, you don't have to prove temporary intent. But if you are doing a different type of application, like a work permit or a study permit, then you do have to disclose prior applications, and they will be curious about, did you get approved in the past? Did you get refused in the past? Have you traveled internationally? Usually it's a good thing to travel internationally and show that you've complied with your conditions and entered your home country again.
Yes. So Hi Canada had a super chat here. We'll just pull this one up and I'll let you maybe address that one. Um, is it okay to enter no for any work history field in the profile for the secondary applicant, the spouse who's actually working? Their education IELTS results are correctly given in the profile. So this kind of fits into that federal court case that we're looking at
Mm-hmm.
earlier today. But Adrian Denham had argued. But yeah, we'll do watch for a podcast on this topic because we're going to look at the federal court cases addressing express entry and really trying to put a check on some of the cruel practices of IRCC in refusing applications. And there's been more, leave applications filed in the last couple of years, and I think in the history of the federal court. And
Yeah.
why is that? Because people's lives are being directly impacted when IRCC chooses to refuse on somewhat sketchy grounds, I guess is the best way to describe it. But what are your thoughts on this one, Alicia?
So this one's really straightforward. The answer is it's okay, right? You don't have to. If the principal applicant has properly met the eligibility criteria, those 67 points on the selection grid, then it's up to the principal applicant to make sure that they prove that they have the CRS score that was going to justify that invitation to apply. And as long as the principal applicant's CRS score is above the ITA score level for that round, they should be okay. And so sometimes you don't need to put in your spouse's work history because it's simply not going to get you any points. So if the spouse does not have any Canadian work history, it's not going to get any points. So you might as well say no. And then what you need to be careful with is just making sure that on the spouse's personal history, if you do get an invitation to apply, you've listed all the work, all the study, all the times of unemployment in the spouse's personal history. But in general, you're not going to get points for a spouse's work unless they have worked in Canada with authorization for at least 1 year, 52 weeks, 1,560 hours.
Perfect. All right, let's jump around a little bit here. Let's take this question from Carolina. And Carolina says, I'm a PR holder here. Can a PR be renewed indefinitely? Can it be denied? Can citizenship application be denied? I'm approaching the citizenship application time.
Mm-hmm. And this, it almost makes me think of the AI panel that we listened to, and a few of the cases where, immigration is using information that they gain later on in the system to be able to make other decisions. So, Carolina, yes, you can renew your permanent residence indefinitely as long as you're making sure that every 5-year term you're meeting the residency obligation as a permanent resident. So depending on the date that you actually received permanent residency, you'll look forward 5 years, and then you've got to prove that you've got physical presence of 730 days within that last 5-year period. And then again, when you do it, you're going to look at the next 5-year period. So you could do that indefinitely. However, there's always a risk if you're only a permanent resident that there are provisions to take away permanent residence under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act if, for example, there's criminality, if you're convicted of a crime that would allow them to take away your status, or if there's some sort of allegation later on down the line that you obtained your permanent residence because of misrepresentation. So they have ways of taking that back. You can apply for citizenship if you qualify for citizenship as well. And then you're looking at 3 years, right? You've got to prove you've been a permanent resident for 3 years. So citizenship applications can also be denied if there was misrepresentation as part of the reason for getting the permanent residence in the first place. So there are cases where sometimes people come as a refugee, and this case that I was referring to that was really actually truly frightening was somebody had come, made a refugee claim, was accepted as a refugee, and then later on they went to apply for a driver's license and they got their photo taken at part of that driver's license application. And what happened then was the Ontario Ministry of Transportation ran that photo through some databases, and somehow it seems like immigration is using some sort of facial recognition software, and they said, oh, well, that person made a refugee claim against this country A, but we think that person is actually from country B. It matches our database. And so there was actually CBSA got that, and they started a proceeding to take away that person's refugee status, and they did. And then that was taken to federal court. And so there are circumstances here at play where if you're only a permanent resident, right, if you never actually apply for citizenship, there are ways that you could lose that status depending on crazy things in the future that you might not have control over.
All right, let's shift to another area. And this is one that we haven't, I don't know if I've ever gotten one like this. This is from John Justin. Hi, Mark and Alicia. What will I do to get a high school diploma in Alberta if I'm holding a work permit as a cook? My education back home is not amounting to a high school graduate. So probably this individual, I bet, is from the Philippines. I can answer this pretty quickly. So there is a general educational development, GED, test that you can take. And I'll just flip my screen around and just show you. So why is this important? Well, Alberta doesn't nominate someone unless they have at least the equivalent of an Alberta high school credential. And so this is where you can go to this link here, General Educational Development, John, and you can go here and you can see that they have ways of doing it. If you're already a past student in Alberta, you can go back and try to update. But this is the one, pass 5 GED tests. And these are the areas here. And if you pass them, at one of these centers, you can, here's the phone number for each of these locations. And you can really write them wherever you are. Looks like there's testing centers all throughout. So this is where you would write the GED. And if you pass that, then that would be the equivalent to an Alberta high school equivalency.
Yeah, and I guess the one word of caution is just be careful that if you're taking a course to prepare for your GED as a work permit holder, you have a prohibition against studying in Canada. And so you just have to be careful to make sure that you're not violating those study without a study permit conditions if you're trying to take a preparatory course to do that GED.
Perfect. Okay, here's a self-employed question for Express Entry, Alicia. Mohammed says, I'm a freelance psychologist. Clients find me from my Instagram account. I provide them with online therapy sessions. How can I get experience letters from these patients, individuals?
Mhm. So, I mean, you could ask for their permission to write particular letters of reference for you personally, saying, I've gone to Mohammed, I was able to consult with them for a psychology session, they're a registered psychologist, and they provided me services from this date to that date. So you could get individual letters. You could also provide invoices, proof that you were actually earning income from a certain level of consultations with people. Um,
And looks like Alicia's internet is just a little bit sketchy today. That's all right. That's why we are fortunate enough to to have both of us here. So yeah, there she's back. Okay, we lost you just for a second there, Alicia. You're back
oh,
with us.
yeah, I'm back. I could hear you,
Okay.
which was weird.
Okay. Well, we're good. So yeah, just continue on.
So you could also talk to your psychologist, registration body and prove that you're active, that you're registered, that you've paid your fees, and that you're licensed to be able to provide psychology services. And then tax documentation and proof of income, and the fact that you have either a sole proprietorship or maybe you're actually incorporated and working with a business. So there's a bunch of different things that you can prove. It is a little bit harder if you're self-employed because you've got to do some legwork to try to prove the type of services that you offer.
All right. Back to the targeted draws. Ozan says, is there any chance that they'll expand the categories later on?
Yeah, so the minister did say that these are their priorities for 2023. And so I think they're trying to balance the fact that people need some sort of certainty and some sort of way to predict which categories are going to be emphasized for some period of time versus the ability to be able to pivot if there are different economic priorities. So we did ask the minister about this as part of our conference, and the one comment that he had about it was that historically, these have been occupations that tend to always be in demand. And so, it's unlikely that these will fall off of the radar in terms of what's going to be needed in the future. There may be things that are added going forward, and we'll just have to see. It depends on consultations and economic priorities.
All right. Next question is from Rachel. She says, my spouse is a citizen and I'm on a work permit. Currently, we live in different towns in Alberta. Will this be a problem on my in Canada spousal sponsorship?
Mhm. So it depends on whether you guys are legally married or whether you're common law spouses. So what happens in terms of the definition is that if you are a common law spouse, you've got to prove that you cohabitated, so you live together physically for at least 12 months continuously with no breaks. Once you've hit those 12 months, it makes sense sometimes that people's jobs or life circumstances require them to be in different cities, and that is okay as long as you can prove there have been no intervening relationships. If you're legally married, then it's easier because you have a legal marriage certificate and you can show that ongoing communication and combination of finances, and you're mutually dependent in terms of emotional and physical and financial intertwining of your lives. So it depends on whether you filed common law or whether you're legally married, and you still will have to prove your bona fides.
All right. Let's hit another super chat. This is flying to Canada. It says, if Express Entry PNP is taking longer and longer, can I consider coming to Canada on a work visa and find a job to improve chances? What are the conditions for a work visa? Is it same or related to a work permit? So there's a couple different
Mhm.
questions here.
Mhm. So, and this is usually a strategy, right? If you want to increase your express entry points or get the possibility of getting a PNP nomination, then you'll want to carefully target which province are you trying to find work in, because you want it to align with where you think you have the best chance of success for a PNP or express entry. So finding a job to improve chances, you can look on the job bank. There's a job match function that you can register for. You only get the plus account on job match if you actually have the ability to work in Canada. So you'd need to have that social insurance number with already a work permit. What are the conditions for a work visa? Well, not everybody needs a visa, right? And this is what we were talking about at the beginning of the live today, is that there are some countries that are visa exempt. So you would only need an electronic travel authorization to come to Canada. So you don't need the visa in your passport itself, but you would still need the work permit, which is your ability to work in Canada. So the visa is just how you get to Canada. You either have a visa if you're from a visa required country, or you have an electronic travel authorization. And then once you get here, you still need the work permit. And I'd encourage you to take a listen of our podcast. We talk about kind of an overview for the Temporary Foreign Worker Program and the IMP program, the International Mobility Program. And that kind of lays out which categories are under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program that need LMIA, a labor market impact assessment from your company, or what are the free trade agreements? What are the international experience categories? What are maybe the Mobilité Francophone programs that you might qualify for under the IMP? So if you go back, I think it's maybe episode 100 or 101.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the first ones there. We had our centennial edition. So I
We
think
did.
it's episode 100, and it's an overview for, yeah. So
Just
there's a
about.
few, yeah, there's a few categories of work permits that you don't need the labor market impact assessment for, but most of them do. So how to hire a foreign worker, and then episode 101, does your employee need a work permit? This is the big thing, is there are some limited circumstances where you don't need a work permit, but the majority of the cases, the rule is you do.
Yes. All right. Next question. This one is Stephen. He says, now this is something, Stephen, that, okay, we'll have to qualify here. So he says, once the owner operator LMIA is approved, could I directly apply for PR by express entry instead of applying for a work permit? So if OO is what you're looking at, OO does not exist anymore. So Service Canada discontinued this ad exempt category basically because it was abused. Too many people were trying to go through it. It was being used not nefarious ways, but quasi illegitimate ways, which undermined the credibility of good people that were applying. And so the OOLMIA is no longer present, but it's really a self-employed work permit. And I think that's really what we're talking about here, Alicia, is, work permits where you could be seen as being self-employed.
Or it might be a 00. Maybe it's a position that's a 00 knock. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it is possible if you have a 00 knock code that you might just try to apply, and
Oh, yes.
that might
There
be
we
what
go. And this
Stephen
is
is
why
getting at.
Alicia and I do not provide legal advice through our little channel here, because you can see, and that's probably why I was had that lawsuit threatened against me by those Quebec schools. It's really tricky. I'll ring the bell there. It's really tricky because sometimes these short little comments can really be misinterpreted. So I was looking at that as owner operator instead of a senior managerial or senior executive level position. So yeah. And why is an OOLMIA so valuable, Alicia? How many points are you getting for that sucker?
Yeah, so the 00, you're looking at 200 bonus points, right? So
Yeah.
normally if you're doing arranged employment points, it's only 50, but if you're in that 00, so a 00, the tier, then you're looking at getting 200 points, which is a big deal.
Yes. Okay, we've got a two-part little question here. We'll pull up from Anne. So Anne says, will apply for a study visa next year. I have remote work from the US. Can this violate 20 hours limit if I continue while studying? So 2 years of purposes for sustainable income only, not for work experience. So if someone comes on a study permit, I think the question is, and they're working for outside of Canada remotely for a US company, are there any restrictions with that? Will it cause problems if she works more than 20 hours while she's a student, but it's not in Canada?
Hmm. And I would say definitely book a consult, because there are a number of thorny issues with this question, and it's not entirely clear to me where the work is, right? Remote work from the US. I'm not sure where the clients are. Um, So in general, for Canada, there is usually a 20-hour limit to the amount of work that you can do, but it's normally Canadian work. So you would also, if you're dealing with US immigration, you'll want to make sure that you're not violating US immigration rules, depending on where the source of that work is, where the business is located, where your payroll is coming from, and where your clients are. So there's a number of issues that are going to intersect there.
Yeah. And the follow-up question says, if it doesn't violate the 20-hour max rule, and I think, at least my interpretation, Alicia, is that the employer is probably in the US and the person's here on a study permit in Canada, working remotely in that way. Is it okay that taxes are not paid in Canada since it's a remote work I got while I was based in my home country? I would even ring the triangle, but realistically, that's not a question Alicia and I can answer. We are immigration lawyers. We're not cross-border tax lawyers. So recommend that you seek advice on that from an accounting professional that deals with cross-border tax. All right. Okay. Okay. Here, Saget says, I have 482 points in CEC. Do I need to try for PNP as my score is not getting above the cutoff? I belong to the STEM category.
Mm-hmm. And yeah. So what do I do, or how do I do it, or what are the strategies? Those are always questions. We need so much more information about your background and history and the way that you calculated your CRS. But take a look at the new category-based knock codes that are on my blog article or on the drop-down from my RCC. It's not all STEM jobs that could be eligible for a category-based draw. So, there's some strategy here. Do you just try to increase your points now? Generally, yes, that's a good thing to do. Some people might say, well, maybe I will have a good chance on a category-based draw if you can prove that you have at least 6 months of work experience in one of these knocks that are listed there within the last 3 years. So take a look at those STEM occupations. It's got to be on this list. It's not everything that's going to qualify. And I hope people are realizing this, that it's only those occupations on the list.
And remember, you have to demonstrate that you have performed a substantial number of the main duties listed in the knock. Mm-hmm. All right. Avin says, hey, Mark, can you talk about study permits for mature students moving with family and the success rate, eligibility, and what would entail a strong case? Well, this is where I'm going to point people right back here to the fact that not only do we have the express entry course that is launching on, well, it's already here, and I strongly encourage you to subscribe. Even though the master class is until June 26th, the course is really pretty standalone. And we have the post-grad 18-month extension course. We have a study permit course that goes through all of the strategies, whether you're a mature student, whether you are someone's just straight out of high school looking to study abroad for your undergrad. All of these things we cover in detail within the course itself. So I strongly encourage you to slide over here and subscribe to the course, the study permit course, which will give you a really solid background. Now, with that being said, obviously, if you have specific questions, like we've addressed before, Avin, we strongly encourage you to book a consult and we can actually talk about it, because every person's situation is just a little bit different and no two people are alike. All right.
And just to add to that too, Mark, there were a few articles that we've written on study permits, and one of them was the top reasons that study permits get refused. So I've written an article there, and you can take a look at that.
Perfect. Okay, let's see what else we hear. Dorius says, I need to submit my ITA docs before the masterclass. Should I book an appointment instead? Yes, go ahead and book an appointment. We can give you any specific direction or advice. Now, remember, in those consults, we don't provide a review of an express entry application in the course of the consults. But what we do is we set things up, and if you choose to retain us, the access to the course, we give free access to the course as well as full support in making sure that your application is complete and correct. All right, let's see here. We'll celebrate some. Ulu here over on Facebook got an ITA today. Congratulations. And AB as well. Hey, AB, you've been around for a while. This is really exciting. I received my ITA today with a CRS score of 492. I had entered June 2021 as the date the applicant first became qualified to practice this occupation while creating the express entry profile. Okay. My CRS score increased on June 1st since the system calculated my work experience for 2 years. I completed my 2 years of work experience in August. So it took all of July, June, all of July, and and okay, I see what, so it's not till August. So it's basically giving you credit. And this is very, very common for people to get. And maybe you can touch on this, Alicia, but I have continuous employment at the moment. Should I decline the ITA? So essentially it rounded up. So what do
Mm-hmm.
you tell people in these situations, given the volatility of the round of invitations? And we don't know what, if, how frequently they're going to be doing category based versus the open CRS, human capital base that they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. And AB, again, like we'd need to talk to you just to understand exactly what's going on, because we don't want to be giving advice on, 3 little text messages on the screen. But in general, if you're not going to be meeting the points that you claimed, and that is what the basis of the draw was, then it's very risky to accept because you don't meet the criteria. And that might lose out in terms of time if they do another draw that you would clearly qualify for within the next 2 months. But there's a number of factors to try to figure out, what was the actual day, how many hours, do you have the pay slips to back it all up? It has to be 30 hours, 1,560. So 30 hours per week. You can't count more than 30 hours in any given week. So there's a number of things to keep in mind when looking at this, and also just kind of this risk benefit analysis of if at the time that you actually submit your EAPR, if you're going to have that number of weeks or months of years that you had claimed, then that's something. But if there was any misrep in the way that you set up your express entry profile and you said you were actually at a year when you weren't, that's also a big red flag.
Yes. Okay, well, I know you got to drop off, Alicia. We'll hit one last little super chat and then I'll address the others before we wrap up if you need to jump off. But Richard, this is really, once again, this is one of these ones here. But he's a 32-year-old software engineer with almost 12 years experience. Undergrad degree, don't seem to be getting anywhere. Points 425. Employers don't seem to reply ready to give up. Any tips?
Learn French, Richard? Can you learn French? Because that one is one of the key areas, right? If you can get some French language points, even if you don't qualify for the new category-based draws, if you can get your score up with some French level skills, that is something that might boost you. Getting a job with an employer that has an LMIA is going to hopefully result in giving you those extra 50 points. So that might be able to make it or break it depending on your NOC score if you are looking at a category-based draw. So if you could potentially get an LMIA-based work permit that's employer-specific and your employer is willing to say they will continue to employ you, those arranged employment points are huge.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll let you drop off, Alicia, and I'll tackle a few more questions here as we wrap up. But thanks for joining us, and yeah, we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Okay, let's jump in. Flying's got another super chat here. So he says, "Hi, Mark and Alicia. Thanks for the explanation. Can you please answer the second question as well?" So if we jump up here, the question was, what are the conditions for a work visa? Is it the same or related to a work permit? Yeah, work visa is a universal term for a work permit. It's just that the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act back in 2002, they decided to change the terminology for a work visa to a work permit. So work permit and work visa for the purposes of what you're describing are the same. The conditions are, you can't study when you're on a work permit. You must leave at the end of your authorized period of stay. Those same things are, transferable. Sometimes people will interpret a work visa if you come from a visa required country as the actual visa that's embedded or imprinted on your passport page. And sometimes they'll call that a work visa. So technically that could be a work visa to allow you to get on a plane and travel. And then once you get to Canada, you'll present your work permit approval letter through the consulate if you're coming from a visa required country, and they will issue the work permit at the port of entry. So normally people, when they're talking about work visas and work permits, kind of mix it up and interchange them. But in Canada, we have the visa that allows you to get on the plane and fly. And then we have the permit, which authorizes you to do, whatever conditions of work that are stipulated when your permit was adjudicated. So that is how that all sets up. Okay, we got another super I know from, let's see, we got this one from Janet. So let's see if I can find Janet's actual question. Okay, Janet says, with regard to the family open work permit introduced in January, Does the principal work permit holder need to have a full-time job, or does a part-time job meet the criteria too? We always focus on full-time. And for immigration purposes, it's 30 hours usually. That's generally what immigration is looking for. So, it's hard because this is one of the difficulties I always have, Janet, in answering these questions, is because, full-time can mean different things and part-time can mean different things. I saw a job advertisement for a part-time job of 25 hours a week. Well, 30 hours could be full-time for the purposes of immigration, but for most employers, they might consider anything less than 40 hours or 37.5 hours part-time work. So it's hard to answer that, but generally I always want to see that the principal applicant has a full-time job. Full-time is what I'm looking for. I'm sure there could be people that were kind of silent about the hours and maybe even got that dependent spouse open work permit approved, but I don't like to take any chances. All right, let's see what else we have here in our, as we wrap up. Okay, Madwu says, hey, Mark and Alicia, not sure if you've answered this before, but does the 1-year Canada experience count if it's remote work, but you've done a 4-year degree in Canada? So this is the tricky part. So remote work, okay, is the remote work in Canada or is it outside of Canada? So if you're studying and if the work is remote, but it's still within Canada, it doesn't count. If that remote work is outside of the country, well, it doesn't necessarily disqualify foreign work experience if you're doing that remotely while going to school. But Madhu, I cannot tell you that's the case in your situation. I need to look at the exact situation. I'm just kind of speculating here. All right, let's see what else we have. This one is from Alva. Alva, good to see you. Why should an individual show attachment to their nation in order to apply for a work permit through the Atlantic Immigration Program, PNP nomination? I mean, the intention to stay is obvious. I don't know. Like when it comes for, well, because the work permit is issued before the PR is approved. And so if the PR is ultimately rejected, then intention to stay in Canada is a big deal. Work permits are usually issued in those circumstances to bridge the gap until the PR is approved because the employer needs you right away. So even any kind of a work permit that's especially outside of Canada before you come, you definitely need to demonstrate your ties to your home country and really check off all the boxes when it comes to the bona fides of a temporary application. And last but not least, we have Muri, who says, if someone has an ITA from BC, express entry, I'm assuming a notification of interest, but also a recommendation from an RNIP committee, what do you think would reach PR sooner? And can you have both applications at the same time? Well, there's no restrictions on having both at the same time. Simple as that. Ultimately, IRCC may make you choose eventually, but there's no restrictions on having two separate applications. There just isn't. So which would I choose? That's tough. BC PNP, if it's express entry, I would have to assume that in almost every case in Canada, an express entry application, BC PNP, would go faster than an RNIP. That's just kind of the way it has been over the last little bit. Okay, I'm going to take a quick little peek here, you guys, and see if there is any. Let's see here. Make sure I'm not falling. Okay, I've got a little bit of time to answer a few more questions. We'll go into overtime today. Why not? We'll go into overtime and answer a few more questions from you fine folks. You like perfect work. Well, thank you. I'm using my iPhone, my iMac camera because my camera is the one I have here at home is being repaired. So, okay. Anne says, thanks, Mark and Alicia, for answering my question. That's noted. I will surely book a consult after I get my LOA. Thank you again. You bet. We're happy to help. Okay. Janet says, okay, thank you. It doesn't mention anything about full or part-time on the government website. I know that's the issue, Janet, right? So there may be people who've been able to get through, but like 30 hours is kind of my minimum. Like I really, really want to make sure the person is full-time, and then there's no uncertainty. The gray areas are really sucky. Okay. Human says, up to what stage of PR application can I change my spouse from non-accompanying to accompanying? Okay. Well, this one absolutely is a triangle. So that's a little ring the triangle. When it comes to permanent residence, changing a spouse from non-accompanying to accompanying has impacts on you. So you can always do it, but understand the moment you add a spouse, then they will be assessed. So if it's express entry and you're adding a non-accompanying spouse as an accompanying, then they will reassess the application for the A11.2 assessment. So basically, they will look to see if the individual, you, the principal applicant, maintains eligibility under the program in which they applied, which is usually the case, but it's the CRS that kicks in. If your spouse has lower language, education, doesn't have any Canadian work experience, all of those will actually cause your CRS score to drop, and they can drop up to a maximum of 40. Most people, the Canadian work experience isn't factored in, but 20 for language ability and 10 for age, you can lose 30 points. And boom, if you drop below the round of invitation level, you could then be left with, well, not having met the original round of invitations and have your application rejected. So you have to be super, super careful with that. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Flying to Canada is still crying, and I'm trying to figure out what flying to Canada. What's your question here? Okay, so we addressed that. I don't see a second question here. I saw your 2 super chats, but I don't see 2 questions here. You've got this one, which is P&P taking longer. Can I consider coming on a work visa and finding a job to improve chances? Well, you still have to establish temporary intent. What are the conditions for a work visa? Is it the same or related to a work permit? Well, I think I've described that. As far as conditions, they vary depending upon the type of work permit. Open work permits are not restricted by employer or location or job title, but closed work permits are. And with every work permit, you have to be able to demonstrate that you'll leave Canada when it expires. So I'm not sure if there is anything more. Okay. All right. Maybe, okay. So let's go back here. What else do we have here? I'll answer a couple more. Ozen, you're all amazing. Thanks for supporting and enlightening our inquiries. You're very welcome. Let's see here. I think, guys, I think we'll wrap it up here. Steven says, I'm thinking about joining the masterclass. What will the masterclass provide? Do you go over the documents uploaded and express entry and provide advice? So understand that masterclasses are designed to answer any questions that you have. The course itself goes over every single aspect, and it probably makes sense to just show one more time what this course is, because I have so many people asking, and better go to here. And I'm told repeatedly that I don't do a very good job of explaining what's inside these courses. So the course itself for the express entry is chock full of every single aspect of the process. And basically, if we go in here and we scroll down, you'll see that I have a detailed breakdown of every single lesson module within the course. There's over 10 hours, 642 minutes of video content where I actually walk you through step by step the whole process. And there's a 4-hour live masterclass where I answer any other questions. It is not a full review of all of your documents. It's not. That's our client-driven process that we use within our firm when you hire us in Holthe Immigration Law. But when it comes to mastering your documents, I have individual lessons for every single type of document, as well as sample documents, checklists, templates. There's just a ton of things. And if I log in quick, and I'll just log in and I'll just show you. I'll go to all my courses here, and I'll go to the Express Entry course. We'll jump straight to Module 6. This is what it looks like when you log in as a newly subscribed student to the program. If we look here, you'll see for lesson 43 records of employment, just as an example, I have an individual video that walks through things, explains things in detail. This one is well, you can see this one's like 40, it's like 24 minutes or something. What is the end? It's 23 minutes. Yeah, 23 minutes long. And then in addition to that, I have a whole bunch more instruction here, and I have a ton of different downloads to support the process. So we've got checklists, we've got sample documents, including sample reference letters. I've got over 30 sample reference letters that people have successfully used in the past to secure their work history and get their application approved. We have our Knox selection tool, which I haven't talked a lot about, sample employer reference letters. And it's, what if I can't get a reference letter? So we've got all of these different tools and resources that are available to help you. And all of that fits within the on-demand lessons. And as I indicated before, there are 6 modules and there are 57 separate lessons. So you only need to pick and choose the ones that apply to you. If you have if you don't have a spouse and you're going through the process, let's go into number 3, completing the Express Entry profile. If you don't have a spouse, then all of the sections that are designed for accompanying spouses, you can just ignore them. So it's designed to be just break down every single aspect of the process. And it's me. I literally explain how it all fits together and how it works. So I highly recommend that people subscribe now. And then once the masterclass is ready, you can get all your questions answered, or just slide over to our firm, book a consult, and it may make sense for you to just hire us to help you make sure the application is done right the first time. There are so many, I can't even begin to tell you how many refusals that I'm seeing. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, come on, what's the big deal? Okay, Choi says, can you also answer my question above? Okay, let's see what we've got here with the super. So Choi says, okay, he says, I wrote different marriage date on the work permit application, ceremony date, and the PR-EAPR registration date. Now applying for work permit extension, should I fill in the same date as before or fill web form to correct the PR-EAPR? I would do both. I would use the correct one. And then if the ceremony date is I wouldn't get too fussed over it ultimately, but if you want to keep everything consistent and just continue with the ceremony date, then that's totally fine. I would continue with your work permit on, using the ceremony date, and then send a web form and just say, hey, please note that I use the registration date in the APR, but as per the marriage certificate, I'm assuming it matches the marriage certificate you included. I just want to point out that the ceremony date was on this date, just so that there's no confusion. Okay, so that is how I would address that one. And let's see, I don't think there's any other supers as we wrap it up here. Flying to Canada, how many do you have here? 1, 2. Okay, we'll see if flying's got another one here. Okay, let's see. I just posted it again, please. Maybe it didn't come through. Let's see. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it for whatever reason, Flying to Canada. It's not being pulled up. Yeah, I'm not seeing your question. Is it too long? But it's just not, I can't find it with the page. Okay, I'll slide over here to our YouTube channel and let's take a look and see if I can find it there. I'm very mindful of you super chatters, and so I definitely want to make sure that you get your questions answered. Let's see if I can figure this out. I don't see it. You say you've posted it again, but I do not see it. I'm even going over here and I'll show you, you guys, what you see here on the screen. So I'm actually scrolling through here, Flying to, and I do not see your question. 2 super chats, 1 question. Second question is still missing. Flying to. Okay, if express entry is taking longer and longer, can I consider? So I've talked about that. Coming to Canada, we talked about coming. What are the conditions? Okay, I've addressed both of those. So I've answered both of those questions. So I'm not sure what else, because I'm seeing nothing else. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll wrap it up there. It's, as always, this wouldn't be what it is without you. Now, I want to show you guys one other thing on the channel, and I want to ask a favor. So we have been right here on our channel, and I'll go back to the main channel here. If you look here, we are sitting at just under 49,000, and I would love nothing more than for the month of June for us to push through 50K. And that would be so cool to have a channel like this that is really, it's not designed to just entertain. It's designed to really help you with your immigration journey. And so I still see flying. I can't see it, so I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, I would love to see this. So if you have not subscribed yet to the channel, please do. You'll also get notified when we do lives like we did just recently. So while I was in Ottawa, I actually did a live with Igor where the minister talked about the targeted draws. And I did it right from my jail cell in the Ottawa jail, which is converted to a hostel. I wanted to stay somewhere different just for fun. And so I made the decision to get a place in the hostel in Calgary, which was really, I'll be honest, it was really fun. So if I show you, I'll show you a couple pictures here just for fun. So this is the opening to it. Let's see if it goes on here. Just give me a second. And I'm going to pull this onto my screen. Okay, there we go. So there's there's the entry. It is so narrow, like unbelievably narrow. So that is that's the front door essentially. And then I'll show you, if you haven't been following me on Twitter, I also showed the inside of it. So this is the inside of where I stayed, the jail. And this is so crazy, you guys, because this cell, it was built in the 1860s. Just a horrific place, absolutely horrific. But that jail cell, they actually wedged up to 12 people in there. And my goodness, it was just, it was hard to even imagine that someone would be in that type of a situation. Let's see, I also had, if I can show you here, let's see if I have these pictures. I've got so many pictures. Let's see, I'm going to jump to the bottom and I'm going to share my cellmates. They had these little placards on either side. I'm going to share this with you guys as well, of the crimes that the people committed who were incarcerated there. So here's one, if it gets on here. This was Delphine, and she was jailed on May 15th, 1865. Crime committed keeping a house of ill fame. Do you guys know what that is? A house of ill fame? Yes, she was, she had a house that was full of prostitutes, and so she was jailed. But then we also had my next door neighbor, John Fairburn, who was jailed on March 15th, 1986 for theft. So that was my experience there, staying at the Ottawa jail. And it was really quite fun. I spent 4 nights there. And in fact, I'm getting prepped up for when I head out to the mountains in the high country. Took a picture here just the other day. Simba and I were out climbing the coulees in preparation for some solid backpacking and activities through the summer here. So we're looking forward to it. All right, guys. Flying says, I think I noticed this place in one of your videos. Yeah. Because the video that we did, and that was one of the things that I was sharing. I'm going to flip over here. The videos that we did, one of them was the Ottawa jail. So this one here, you can see as I hover over it, I was actually recording from inside the jail cell. And Igor and I did a breaking news on the express entry draws. I did a quick one in the morning when I was getting ready to travel on the airplane bright and early to let people know what was happening. But then we've also done videos on the 13 new visa-free countries. So these are here in addition to the lives and what we're doing what we're doing now. So if you go to the channel at any time and you're wondering, where do I get access to the videos that Mark does in his team? We often do a lot of live streams just because it's so quick, and then they're available later for watching as a recording. So check those out. A couple other shout outs again. Obviously the blogs that we have are extensive. Definitely subscribe to the Canadian Immigration Podcast. There's going to be a bunch of new episodes coming up in addition to all of this. And our Journey Business Plans is our sponsor for the podcast. So subscribe, iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And it's going to be awesome. So Flying says, right, that one I saw live. Perfect. All right, you guys, thanks for tuning in. Another great live Q&A. And we will see you next week, or if the government decides to do another crazy announcement.